Hello, Noble Knitter, it's Nancy Queen, and today I'm going to give you 5 tips that every beginner knitter needs to know. So let's dive right in. Before we get into the tips, I want to let you know about today's sponsor. It's me. So I'm going to give you more about that in just a few minutes. So let's get into the tips. Tip number 1 is choose plain yarn and the right needle size. Now, what do I mean by plain yarn? Well, something like this like really soft, cozy, fuzzy yarn is what everyone wants to start knitting with. But it's really hard to see because if you look at this, it's actually got all this fuzz on a core, which once you get the hang of knitting, this is going to be a really fun, easy yarn to knit with. In fact, I've got a link to a free scarf and a free blanket. So I'll link those in the description below, but you want to get a few projects under your belt before you tackle a yarn like this. What I mean by plain is you want a yarn that's very smooth, like this. Just what you think of when you think of yarn. Very smooth so that you can actually see the stitches and understand what you're doing. But that doesn't mean you can't pick something fun. This yarn is a self-striping yarn, and they make this mandala yarn from Lion Brand in lots of different variations. In fact, there are versions from Knit Picks, there's versions from Premier Yarns. So go look for a fun yarn, but as you can see, even though it's self-striping, so it's going to stripe up something like this when it's knitted, it's still a plain yarn. It just changes colors as you knit. So either one of these is going to work. And you also want to make sure that you're using the right needle size. So the yarn will recommend the needle size. So if you look on the label, you can see here's the needle sizes that they recommend you use. In this case, they want you on a US 10 or 11 needle. They also give the gauge there, but we're really more concerned with the needle size matching the yarn. So this yarn is a thinner yarn, and it's a totally different needle size here that you'd need to work on that one, and it's found there. Same thing with this. You just look on the label and you'll see the needle size recommended. But you want to choose a plain yarn and the right needle size. Tip number 2 is practice knitting garter stitch, which is knit every row, several times before you dive into other projects. You want to get a hang of knitting and understand what the stitches look like, what it's supposed to be doing, and really get that down before you pick up purling or move on to more advanced projects. In fact, I recently did a video of 10 projects that are all garter stitch, and you can check them out here, and I'll provide a link to them in the description below. And tip number 3 that a lot of knitters don't understand, they really need to do this, because when you're knitting a project, this has happened to me way too many times. When you're knitting a project, you think you're always going to remember it. But the minute you put it down, walk away, pick up another project, you forget. So tip number 3 is keep notes of what you're knitting. I created a free downloadable project worksheet so that you can keep track of what you're knitting, the yarn you used. There's even a place to take a picture of your finished project, who you made it for, everything, the needle size, because you might want to refer back to that project at another time and you think, oh, I don't know what yarn I used or needle size or how many stitches I cast on. So this worksheet will help you. I have a friend who used to do this religiously, and what she did was she went and got a binder with those plastic sleeves. She just printed this off, and then I used to have one when I had my store. I had a worksheet like this. She'd print it off and keep her pattern on one side, and then on the other side she'd have her worksheet with all of her information. It's a great tool to have. Then when she needed it, she had a whole binder filled with all of the projects that she's completed, who she made them for. So don't forget to go download that And let's move on to tip number 4. Tip number 4 is choose a pattern that is your skill level. I see this happen way too often, that knitters bite off way more than they can chew. You feel overwhelmed, and then you feel like you're a failure, you don't know what to do, and you don't have knitting success. Well, when you're a beginner, the whole key is having success. So look at the patterns and decide, is this my skill level? Is it all knitting? Are there advanced stitches? You also want to look at the abbreviations and make sure you understand what you're doing, how to read those abbreviations, and how to actually execute any of the abbreviations that you see. And practice those stitches if there's anything that is a little bit next level before you dive into the project. You don't want to be this far into your project, then it has a lace portion and you've never done lace and you decide you're going to try it here. I would work on that on a separate little swatch of your plain yarn before you move on to that. And the 5th tip I have for you is to practice your knitting. The advantage of practicing is just like learning to play the piano. You'll notice that your stitches become more even, more consistent. You understand what the stitches are supposed to be doing. If you make a mistake, you can identify them because you know when you stop and look at your knitting that something's not right. So practicing is really, really important in knitting. I'm excited to share with you the upcoming launch of my 30-day knitting growth course. This course is structured to provide all of the foundational knowledge you need, and it condenses 3 years of knowledge into just 30 days. Most knitters are taught how to cast on, knit, and bind off, and we're left to figure the rest of it out on our own. I've met countless knitters who struggle to move beyond those simple basics. They're frustrated because they can't find an organized and trustworthy source to be their guide. That's why I created this course. The 30-day growth course includes lessons featuring 25 stitching and technique lessons, 13 notions and materials lessons. It even includes 7 simple knitting patterns that apply to the technique that you just learned. It has everything you need to graduate from beginner knitting. After taking the 30-day growth course, you'll unlock a whole new world of knitting possibilities and discover a new knitting confidence. Now, this course is launching on Tuesday, August the 31st. And if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, please head on over to nancyqueen.com and join my mailing list. The morning of the launch, you'll be sent all of the details about the course, including the registration info. You'll find a link in the description below, and I will see you in the next video.